Hey, it's Mr. Sorensen coming to you live from the wood shop, and today we're going to continue on with part 2 of our calculating board feet lesson that we looked at. Actually, what we're going to do today is we're going to move forward into estimating the cost of a project and creating a cutting list. As you can see, when I go to a store to buy furniture, obviously I have a cost that is involved, and somehow I need to know, is that a good price for that project? Or another reason that it's important might be because I personally build the cabinet, and now I need to know, how much am I going to charge for this? Unless I'm able to estimate the cost of my project, I'm going to just take a guess, right? I'm going to take a stab at a cost. Here's what I'm going to charge you. And oftentimes I could come to the realization too late that I undercharged the person for the project. In fact, the price that I sold it for was way less than it actually cost me to build it. And that would be a big disappointment for me. It could be a very costly mistake. So I want to be able to know up front, before I ever make a deal with somebody and sell them a project, that I am charging them accurately. And the way I do that is I take the thing that we learned last week, calculating board feet, and I just move forward with it a little bit. I add a few more things to it, and I can come up with the cost of a total project. So that's what we're going to look at today. So to start with, for our example here, we're going to start with a very simple project, and what we're going to use for our estimating the cost of a project is this simple wooden toolbox. This is a project that we have built in the past here at the Royal High School wood shop. And what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can estimate the cost of this box accurately. The nice thing about this project is it's fairly simple, square, and straightforward. Everything that we do here will apply to a much more complicated project. But we're going to just simply look at this project and do some calculating and see if we can figure out what the cost is before we ever try to sell it. So to start with, I need to take the sizes of each of the parts of my box, transfer them to the board. I basically have a front and a back that are equal size, a side and a side that are equal size, a top and a bottom that are equal size. And then we'll look at the tray on the inside. So we'll start with the top. I'm going to list out the description so I know what piece I'm talking about. The width, so let's start with the top. Number of pieces, I have the top and the bottom. That's 2 times, the thickness is 3/4, times the width is 10, times the length is 18, divided by 144. We'll do the side. There's 2 of those, times 3/4, times. Now, it's important when I do the side, because the side is almost square. So I need to remember which is the width, which is the length. If I do this wrong, it creates a problem, because this is a cutting list. I'm going to take this list back to the tools and I'm going to cut my pieces from it. If I have these numbers reversed, I'm going to end up with pieces that don't work. So this is my width. That's 9. And this is my length. That's 10. The front and back. The length is 18, same as the one up here. divided by 144. And then I think I'm down to my final pieces. I have 8 pieces. So what I notice is that the tray sits in the top of the box. Down inside the box are 2 little runners that the tray is sitting on. So I need to calculate those. So I'm going to call that the runner. There are 2 of them. Times the thickness and the width are 3/4. So 3/4 times 3/4 times the length. The length is 16.5. Divided by 144. All right, here's all the parts that go into my box. They're all listed out. Now I've created a cutting list. So I've come to the end of my first goal here, which is I now have a list that I can take back to the table saw and start cutting pieces. All the sizes for all the parts that go into this box are now laid out. But that's only one of the goals that we had. The second goal is to create an estimate for what is this going to cost us. So let's move on into that. The next thing I need to do to estimate my cost is I now need to calculate all of the board foot for all of the pieces. You can see that this is a pretty small project, but I have 8 pieces I have to do all the calculations for. If I had a really big project, I could have 20 or 30 pieces that I have to calculate all the board feet for every single piece. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. To do that, I'm going to use my calculator. And one thing that is a hint that might help somebody, if you have a hard time figuring out what 3/4 inches in a decimal, right? When I put this into the calculator, I have to turn 3/4 into a decimal. If you have a hard time with that, you might want to go ahead up front before you start doing any calculations and just rewrite them as decimals. So if I go to my calculator, 3 divided by 4 equals 0.75. Right, on my piece of paper, I could just go through and take all my fractions, turn them into decimals, so that now when I do my calculations, it goes a little bit faster. And then I'll simply punch this into the calculator. 2 pieces times 0.75 times 10 times 18 divided by 144 equals 1.875, or we'll call it we'll round to the second place, so it's 1.86 equals 1.86 board feet. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest of them, and I will get a total out of it. So I've got the total of all my board feet. Each part is totaled up. Now I'm going to add all of those together to get my grand total. Now comes the calculating of all that material. So I took the calculator and I added up the total from all of the boards that go into the toolbox, and I came up with my total material. My total materials was 5.76 board feet of lumber. Now, as you know, when we build, seldom do I end up with just using the exact amount of lumber that I start with. There's a lot of scrap that comes off of pieces of wood that I'm building with, and I have to buy that. Somebody has to pay for that scrap. So when I go to calculating out the cost of my project, I have to add the scrap in ahead of time. Scrap is around 20%. Could be a little higher. It could be a little lower depending on what you're building, but 20% is a pretty good amount. So I'm going to take 5.76 times 20, and then I'll hit the percentage button. That's 1.15. So I'm going to put that in. Now I need to add those two up. 5.76 plus 1.15 equals 6.91 is the total of waste plus toolbox lumber. So now what I need to do is I need to take all of that lumber and I need to times it by the cost of the lumber. What is the lumber yard charging me for pine, which is what that toolbox was made out of? So we're just going to use a number. I'm going to pick a number. I'm going to say that the price of pine right now is $2.15 a foot. That is not the cheapest pine that you can buy, but it's also not the most expensive pine that you can buy. So I'm going to take 6.91 board feet times 215, and I get $14.86. $14.86 for the lumber that I'm going to spend to build that box. Now the next thing I need to put in there is any hardware cost, right? So furniture often is going to include things like door handles, hinges, little decorative clasps, anything that's like that in the project. So let's take a look at what hardware we have. In our toolbox that we're building, we have a number of different hardware pieces that we have to consider. So on the front here, from the outside of the box, we can see we have a clasp. Over here on the side, we have a set of handles. So if there's a handle on this side, that means there's one over here. It probably comes in a package of 2. If I open the box, I see some additional hardware. I have a way of holding the box open so it doesn't slam. So there's a chain and some eye hooks. That can usually come in a package, or sometimes there's a, instead of a chain, it'll be a metal piece, so we would have to look for that. And I can see that I also have matching hinges that would go on the box. So I'm going to count that up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 different hardware items that we're going to need to come up with a cost for. At the hardware store, and as if you remember, we looked at 4 different pieces of hardware that we need for this project. So what I need to come in here and find is, what is this going to cost me? What is the cost of each of those pieces that I need? So there's a whole variety of hinges. Here are some hinges, and I'm going to have to choose the one that I need, and then I'm going to look for the cost of that. So I'll pick one here, $6.99 for hinges. So I'm just going to keep track of that. We needed a clasp. All right, here's a clasp that they have. Now, one of the things that I have to consider is that the colors should all be the same. So it might take a few minutes to find that, or I might find that, you know, I can't get it here because they don't have the kind that I want. Here's one that will work. And the clasp is $4.59. I also needed a way to hold the box open. The other thing I need is a way to hold the box open. So here is a piece of hardware that they sell here. This is a great way to do it. That was $6.99. I could also do it with the chain and the hooks, just like we saw on the actual box that was there. That would be another way. Again, I just need to go figure out what is the cost of hooks, what is the cost of a foot of chain. And so that's 3. The last thing I need is the handles. So the handle that I can find is the wrong color. I don't know whether that's going to make a difference or not in the cost, but I'll go ahead and write that down. Those are $5.99. Okay, so we've got the prices now for all the hardware that we want to use on our project, so we can head back to the shop and figure out what this is going to cost. So let's head on back. Now what I need to do is add to the lumber the cost of the hardware. If we remember back to a little bit earlier, $24.56, right? We went on a trip over to the hardware store. We came back. The total that we ended up with was $24.56 for the 4 pieces of hardware that are needed. So now what I need to do is I need to add those two together. $14.86 plus $24.56 equals $39.42. So that amount is the amount that it's going to cost for all the wood and all the hardware for my box. But if I'm going to sell this, if I'm going to sell it to somebody, then I have to add in one more little piece of it, and that's tax. So if I don't add that in when I tell you the price, then I'm going to have to pay it out of my pocket. So $39.42 is the total cost of the wood and the hardware, and I'm going to times that by 7.75, and I hit the percent button. That's $3.06. All right, so now I'm going to take the cost of the wood plus the cost of the hardware plus the tax. That's going to give me my grand total. $14.86 plus $24.56 plus $3.06 equals $42.48. $42.48. We've been able to, before we ever made the box and tried to sell it, calculate out how much the box is going to cost, so that when I charge somebody for it, so when I say, sure, I can build it for you for this amount, I make sure that I can do that. There's one piece that's missing out of this cost, right? So if I built that toolbox for you, I wouldn't want to charge you $42,848 for it, because the one thing that's missing out of all of this information is my labor. How much do you want to make per hour for making the box? So that's another piece we would have to add into this. This just gives me the total cost of the box. But then I would have to add in my hours. If I want $15 an hour and I want to work 3 hours on it, if I think I could get it done in that amount of time, then I'm going to charge you 15 times 3, another $45. Add $45 to that, I'm close to $90 for that toolbox. Now you can see why real furniture made out of real wood by real people, right? If it's not made by a computer or some sort of robotic manufacturing plant, you can see why things cost a lot of money. There's a lot of cost that goes into hand fabricating a product. I'm going to give you guys a couple of practice problems to do on your Google form. You can do the calculating and then submit that so you can get your work in for this week. Hope you guys are doing really well, and I will look forward to talking to you next time.